How would you like to democratize the hospitality business? Grabbing a snack at one of the San Francisco tech crowd's favorite haunts, I was face to face with Airbnb CEO Brian Chesky's charismatic vision. It was March 2013, and I'd been advised that Brian had a Steve Jobs type of intensity. He was whip smart, asked a million questions, and wanted to change the world. He was not your average young tech CEO. He wanted to solve global problems as much as he wanted to create a successful business. I was just home from a 5-week odyssey to Asia, experiencing 5 festivals including Kumbh Mela, the massive 100 million person Hindu pilgrimage. So I was a little jet lag confused even before Brian offered that provocative proposition about how would you like to democratize the hospitality business. How do you answer that question when you've spent more than a quarter century as a hotelier? In 1987, I started my own boutique hotel company. I was in my mid-20s and I got a little too clever calling it joie de vivre. I liked the fact that this French phrase for joy of life also defined our mission statement. How many companies have a mission statement that's also the name of the company? Well, my friend Bert Jacobs, whom I mentioned in Chapter 1, pulled off this feat with Life is Good. But most people can at least pronounce, spell, and understand the meaning of his company name. As for Joie de Vivre, I joked that the brand was popular with intellectuals and francophiles. Fortunately, there were lots of customers who fit our psychographic, and the company eventually grew into the second largest boutique hotel company in the U.S., with 52 boutique hotels in California, each one with its own unique character and spirit. Then 24 years later, in 2010, I sold it. Why? You'll hear more about my story throughout this audiobook, but let's just say that something deep inside me told me it was time for a change. You may have heard that same internal voice. It's easy to ignore it or silence it for a time, but then it grows louder, especially in the middle of the night. Once I finally gave in to that voice, telling me to sell the company, I knew my next path would be offbeat. I was in my early 50s, and I knew I still had some music inside me, but I just wasn't sure where to share it. I had recently founded Fest 300, a website dedicated to profiling the world's 300 best festivals, and I was sharing a little bit of my music with my small startup team there. But this felt more like a passion project than a new career. As I was pondering my next step, Brian, who'd read my book Peak, reached out to me and asked if I would give a speech on hospitality innovation at his small, fast-growing tech startup. He introduced me to his co-founders, Joe and Nate, as well as the head of product, a word I didn't really understand, the Luddite that I was, a guy named Joe Bot, who is also known as Joe Zede. Nice bunch of guys, and they've truly aspired to grow the company into a hospitality giant. All of this sounded good, but I was such an old school hotel guy and not even sure what Airbnb was. In fact, I asked a millennial friend of mine if it was a subsidiary of Couchsurfing. For that matter, I didn't even have an Uber or Lyft app on my phone in early 2013, and I'd never heard of the term the sharing economy. Science fiction writer William Gibson wrote, "The future is here, it's just not evenly distributed yet." That aptly describes this old dog pondering a new trick when Brian asked me to come on board as the company's head of global hospitality and strategy. Initially, I was excited about the global reach of the company and the opportunity to democratize hospitality. But I was also more than a little intimidated. At 52 years old, I'd never worked in a tech company, where one's value can be defined by the maxim, I code, therefore I am. Let's face it, I don't read or write code. I was nearly twice the age of the average Airbnb employee, and after 24 years running my own company, I'd be reporting to a smart guy who was 21 years my junior. What would it feel like getting my first performance review from a boss young enough to be my son, who I was also supposed to mentor? I asked a few hotelier friends whether they thought I should join Airbnb. One hotel exec mused, alluding to the film Field of Dreams, "If you build it, They will not come, but they will laugh. There's a tiny market of people who want to stay in someone else's home. That wasn't very encouraging. But I did have a few tech-minded friends who told me Airbnb was a rocket ship ready to launch. And my gut told me that home sharing might just be scaling the experientially minded live like a local ethos that boutique hotels had pioneered for the previous quarter century. At the end of the day, it wasn't the financial upside that intrigued me as much as it was the prospect of sharing the same air with this young and curious rebel CEO who was the son of two social workers. I seemed to have a strong instinct for the fresh scent of possibility, and I sensed a blooming bud of potential in Brian. His humble roots, visionary aspirations, and deep desire to create a more connected world lifted the spirits of all around him. Intuitively, I felt we had something to learn from each other. So I told Brian I was in.